Hello, my name is Margaret Adele, and I am not usually the first to anything. I know I call myself BookTube's happy hipster, but it is very rare that I can actually claim that I liked anything before it was popular. But it just so happens that I am actually on the ground floor of like a viral trending kind of thing for once, and I am milking this. So, today, we are going to be discussing Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree, how this book is very quickly going viral, and what it means for the new subgenre that's emerging with it. But first, something feels off. I feel like I need to switch my vibe a little bit. There we go, much better. So, let's start by talking about the author first. Travis Baldree is a debut author with this book. However, he's been in the high fantasy fiction space for like a really long time now. Possibly my favorite fact about him is that he created the video game Fate, which was a cartoonish dungeon crawler that I was obsessed with as a kid and got re-obsessed with during quarantine in 2020. Check out my medieval Mrs. Claus. And he's also done audiobook narrations for other lit RPG indie books. So he has a bit of his own following in this space, although I don't know just how much of a following audiobook narrators get, but clearly he's done his homework, knows the tropes, and I don't think he was expecting all that much when it came to Legends and Lattes. He's changed some of his socials now, but I recall seeing early on that his socials would say things like, an author, I guess. It was very kind of dismissive about this book. I don't think he was expecting it to turn into what it became. But first, let's actually talk about the book. Now, the book itself is all about an orc woman named Viv who has been a barbarian with an adventuring party for many years, and she's ready to retire. But she doesn't just want to go off with her spoils. No. She wants to open a coffee shop. In the high fantasy world this book is set in, coffee does exist, but it's kind of a more little-known specialty drink for gnomes than the widespread phenomenon it is in our real world. As a result, the majority of the people that Viv talks to has never had coffee and has no idea what it is, and she sucks at explaining it. I believe she calls it as tea but different for the majority of the book. Now, when I say that this is all about her building the coffee shop, I mean literally step by step building the coffee shop. We follow her as she comes to this town, finds the building that she wants to buy, haggles to buy it, then finds the contractor that she wants to either tear down or modify the building, and she has to decide on things like what resources she needs, and she's hiring people, and she's creating the menu, and getting to know the regular customers. It is very much day-to-day stuff, and I realize that as I'm explaining it like that, that sounds like it could be boring, but the fun of it is that there's this kind of charm, and that Viv has a lot of heart, but doesn't really know what she's doing, and the characters are all adorable in their way. You have the terse Cal, who doesn't speak very much at all, but means a lot with a few words he says, and the little ratkin baker Thimble, and the legally distinct from a tiefling Tandry. I mean, yes, I know she's a succubus, and I know that succubuses or succubi are like their own creatures, but I get so much tiefling vibes from her. But no, this entire book, despite having D&D vibes, despite the fact that I put it on my books for gay D&D nerds list, is distinct from any tabletop game. No one needs to be sued. And in general, this book has been termed a cozy high fantasy. Now that term, I know for a lot of people can be a little bit confusing when you're first getting into genres. What makes a book cozy? What does that mean? Now the term cozy when put in front of any genre is kind of confusing. Like, why are we calling a murder mystery cozy? But generally speaking, a cozy anything is a subgenre of its given genre wherein the more gruesome or tense elements have been dialed down to let the more fun, cute, or mystery elements come through. For example, in a cozy murder mystery, you are very rarely ever actually fearful that the protagonist is in danger. It's not a serial killer, they could strike again thing. It's a this woman that just inherited this tea shop has to solve a mystery with her cat. And also she's suddenly a witch for some reason. Now, again, like I just mentioned there could be some fantasy elements within cozy mysteries or other cozy books, but they tend to be more in the modern world, just with some fantasy elements on top of it. You don't really see a lot of cozy high fantasy. I personally struggle with high fantasy because it is just so much mental work, both in the heavy world building and also in the giant stakes. It's always a war and things are going horribly wrong. And sometimes I just want to vibe. And that's where Legends and Lattes and the entire cozy high fantasy subgenre comes in. There is a MacGuffin and there is an antagonist looking for the MacGuffin, but that's not really the point of the story. That's like really just a conflict to be overcome to get to the point of the story, which is very much found family vibes, building your own community around yourself vibes. And yes, of course, there is a romance. And not only is there a romance, it's a queer romance. We have ourselves a sapphic romance. Viv gets herself a totally not a tiefling, very legally distinct succubus girlfriend. And they're adorable together. And that is also fairly low stakes. There's not a lot of angst and drama in their relationship. There are some things that need to be worked out, but it is always viewed through the lens of they will be worked out. You're not supposed to be super scared for any of the characters going into this. Now, there are a couple moments that do get a little bit scary, but they are very quick, and it's more on the building in itself. And in general, this book, I thought, was always going to be fairly well primed to take off. Not only did the author already have a little bit of a name for himself in this sort of subgenre, but also it's just a really fun idea and also a really good book. What I did not realize until recently, and I don't know how I did not realize this, is this book got a giant leg up with a huge shout out. In late February, around the time of the book's publishing, Shannon Maguire actually discovered this book on her Twitter feed. If you're unaware, Shannon Maguire is a traditionally published author and is done pretty well for herself. She's one of BookTube's favorites. I have not read any of her work, although they have been recommended to me endlessly. And considering the fact that we have very similar opinions on this book, I just might have to check her stuff out. But she gave a shout out to the book both early on when it was first coming out and published, and then much later on after having read it herself. As I filmed this, it's been a couple days, I believe, since she has talked about it on her Twitter feed and with like a long Twitter thread with a review, and in general, praising the book, loving it, but specifically calling out its low stakes, more comforting vibes of the entire tone of it. And a lot of people have responded to this Twitter thread talking about specifically those vibes and how they want more of this low stakes high fantasy. And that's where I believe the big question is this going to become a new trending, I guess you could say, subgenre for fantasy? Because we all know, and it feels so redundant to keep saying it, the world has been in a particularly horrible, more horrible than usual state for a couple of years now. Like you remember the kind of jokes we made about 2016 and how tame those seem now? We live in a world where our everyday is high stakes. And for a lot of people, the idea of low stakes fantasy is something they've already been getting invested in other ways. Ren fairs, for example, are low stakes. It's like you just get to pretend to be a character in a high fantasy novel, just like going to a festival. And there's also things like D&D campaigns or other tabletop RPG campaigns that spend entire sessions just having a shopping trip. And there are entire subgenres on TikTok that are literally just cosplayers and LARPers just wanting to be their high fantasy characters, just chilling. The idea of wanting to be in these spaces without stakes has been around for a hot minute, but it is fairly surprising that there's not a lot in the way of books specifically for this. Now, this is not to say that Legends and Lattes is the very first of its kind or that no one else has tried anything similar to this. I liken it a lot to Tavern by Destin J. Munden, which is also a high fantasy with a lot of slice of life tabletop RPG style elements, also with an orc protagonist. And I especially love this one because it is written by a black man, and so he works a lot with the tropes around orcs and how they have so often been coded as being black. And there is some stakes, and I believe the stakes in this one I would probably consider higher than Legends and Lattes, but this has been done. However, there has not been a very big concerted effort to get this genre out there. However, as we are discovering with this, there's definitely a concerted need for it. As of right now, as of filming this, Legends and Lattes is like number 1 or 2 of several different subgenres on the Amazon Kindle lists, and its Goodreads rating is over a 4.5, again, as I film this, and that, if you know Goodreads, is really high. Like, I think technically, right now, the Legends and Lattes is like 4.55, which is higher than the Lord of the Rings, the first book I checked. Now, obviously, Lord of the Rings has gotten a lot more reviews. It's gotten a lot of more time to become a beloved, iconic story. But the fact that this debut work is not only getting so much attention because of both the author's grown audience and a big shout out, but that everyone seems to be very universally agreed. Like, I think on Amazon, the rating is a full 5 stars. Everyone has agreed, we want more of this. We like this. So here becomes a big thing. Who's going to be next? I think if other authors, both indie and trad, are smart about it, they'll see what's going on with this book, and they'll see the giant need to escape into these realms without fear that their beloved characters will die, and just be there. And Shauna McGuire mentioned in her Twitter feed reviewing this book that she actually doesn't want another book that is a direct sequel to this. She wants to just know that Viv and Tandri and Cal and Thimble and all of them are just vibing, having a good time. But instead would like a book somewhere else in this world or with this same kind of vibe. And I have to think that other indie authors are seeing this, noting it, and I am like 90% sure at least 1 or 2 manuscripts have already been started. Now, this is a little bit of a prediction because this book hasn't been out long enough for us to really see what the full impact of it would be. It was published in late February. It is late March as I filmed this. So it's only been about a month. Things could change. This could be a short-lived thing, but I don't think so. The world we live in, everyone is so tired and burnt out and just wants to go live their hobbit dreams in fiction without fearing some dark evil wizard dude. So, if you know of any authors that have talked about getting into this genre, if you know of any books that are similar to this, especially, I would love to make a second version of the Books for Gay D&D Nerds list moving forward. Let me know, because I genuinely think, and I might have to do extra work to keep my finger on the pulse of this one, I think we're going to see more of this genre moving forward. More vibes, more cute orc girlfriends, and more orcs inventing iced coffee. That's how you know. That's how you know that it's a queer book, because the orc and her girlfriend invent iced coffee. And that is just absolutely wonderful to me. Thank you so much for watching. I know this is a little bit different than my usual content, but I liked being on the ground floor of this one. I wanted to make my full prediction of things moving forward, and I'm not alone in these predictions. A lot of people have been saying they want to see more of this, but let's hope that this actually comes to fruition, because I will read all of these books. And with nothing else to say, I hope you have a wonderful day and a marvelous tomorrow.